FF7's Honeybee Inn has everything. A bunch of buff dudes, beautiful women in bumblebee costumes, Reeve's dad, a pushy hostess who calls you Pooh. Wait, what? Why does the honey girl in the lobby call you Pooh? Is it just a weird translation quirk? That's a logical conclusion, but no, it's not the reason. As it turns out, the answer can be found in the room above. Badger the honey girl on the left enough times and she'll come up with a nickname for you. Pooch. This nickname is what the honey girl in the lobby begins to call you after you walk in, only to bite her tongue and address you more politely. But hold on, that doesn't make sense. You haven't been given that nickname yet. And even if you had, how could the hostess in the lobby possibly know of it? What you're witnessing here is just one of many holes left over in the Honeybee Inn's final implementation. Believe it or not, FF7's retail release includes only a small portion of what the developers originally programmed for this section. Once you realize this fact, you'll begin to notice just how disjointed and incomplete the whole segment feels. Think about it. You walk into the inn only to be hounded by a woman who demands you pick a room. There's no sign of any other customers, and no staff to greet you and explain the nature of the establishment. And that's because those NPCs are all on the first floor. Ever notice the Honeybee Inn's exterior is clearly 2 stories tall? When you enter the building in the game's final build, you actually enter on the 2nd floor. That's right, the entire downstairs has been scrapped from the story, along with half of the inn's unique field maps. Today, we're going to show you those maps, and all the crazy events that take place on them. Welcome to the Uncensored Honeybee Inn, FF7's single largest chunk of cut content, and a treasure trove of lost lore. We've got Honey Girl Tifa, we've got Wedge's lost brother, we've got Palmer and the Shinra middle manager, we've got Zack being a terrible boyfriend, we've got Cloud begging for women's underwear, and much, much more. But before all that, a little bit of background is in order. Long before modders and data miners learned of its existence, FF7's own developers alluded to a raunchier build of the Honeybee Inn back in 2005. In an interview for Studio Bentstuff's Ultimania Omega, director Yoshinori Kitase and scenario writer Kazushige Nojima got to talking about scrap scenes that didn't make the final game. What I remember is the Honeybee Inn stuff. The events there were created by Toriyama, but at first the content was even more extreme and everyone was saying it was overkill. Was it really that over the top? Pretty much. For example, Palmer would emerge from the inn saying, "Ah, that was refreshing." Toriyama would often come up with these surprising, or maybe I should say problematic events which had to be fixed on many occasions. For instance, there was this scene on the station platform where Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge from Avalanche would face each other and try with all their might to fuse together. Followers of our channel will by now be familiar with Toriyama's antics. Of the 10 individuals responsible for implementing FF7's events, he was by far the most adventurous and idiosyncratic, and the original Honeybee Inn is without a doubt his most elaborate creation. In the late 2000s, people started putting the pieces of this gargantuan puzzle together. Their research culminated in a legendary article on the Lifestream.net, posted by Shademp starting in 2011. This 15-part series explores the unused assets left over in FF7's files, charting their excavation from the game's original Japanese release and the rigors of assembling them into something coherent. It would be many more years, however, before modders had the tools and understanding to implement the uncut Honeybee Inn in its entirety. Now, with the new Shinra Archaeology Cut mod, we can experience this content as Toriyama originally conceived it, fully translated and playable in English. So, without further ado, let's begin our tour of these spicy scrap scenes and see how they compare to the final cut. We start outside of the actual inn, on a map called MRKT3. In the final version of the game, the entrance to the Honeybee Inn is blocked by an older-looking man and a bouncer in a suit, meaning you can't enter the first time you visit. The older man informs us about a new girl named Tifa, but mentions she's gone off for an audition at Don Corneo's mansion. This interaction updates the plot progression value to allow players to proceed with the main quest. In the original implementation of this map, however, the man in the suit was either absent or positioned in a different place, meaning we could enter the inn immediately. Moreover, the older-looking man at the door doesn't give us any hints about Tifa's whereabouts, so we'll need to track some down inside. Upon heading for the inn's entrance, Aerith will split off and chastise Cloud for wanting to go in. You can try to justify your decision, but Aerith's not falling for it. Time to enter the inn proper. Right away, we find ourselves in an unfamiliar area. Welcome to the Honeybee Inn's first floor. It's home to 3 maps, 2 of which were cut from the final game. We start in the lobby, referred to internally as Onna 1. To the left is a dressing room you'll recognize from the retail version, called Onna 2, while the right-hand door leads to a guest lounge called Onna 3. The lobby is a bright and colorful room with tons of flashing lights and ample signage, all of which uses Japanese characters. Needless to say, this map strikes a much stronger first impression than its upstairs neighbor, and immediately evokes the gaudy feel of a 90s Japanese love hotel. On the left wall is a collection of headshots advertising the Honey Girls customers can currently request. Most of the text beneath the pictures is too low res to read, but we can just make out Tifa's name below the middle right portrait. Moreover, the image shown matches an early CG model of Tifa included in FF7 press kits. On the room's far wall is a staircase leading to the second floor, which we'll get to in a bit. To the right of that is a reception desk with a giant screen above it. This screen displays 4 different images, a menu of services that visitors can book, and 3 different headshots of Honey Girls, including one with the same model as Tifa, though you'll notice the palette is much greener. Finally, the room's right wall includes a doorway leading to a lounge where guests can wait, as well as a sign warning that hostess poaching will result in a fine. Let's enter the room on the left. As in the final game, we see 3 Honey Girls refreshing their makeup and resting between shifts. Almost all of the dialogue here is the same as it is in the final version, with 2 small exceptions. If you talk to the Honey Girl on the right 2 times, she'll have a third unused reaction to Cloud's response. It's possible this would have been triggered by a different second dialogue choice. Next, if you come back after choosing a room on the second floor, the Honey Girl on the left will apply makeup to you. In the earlier implementation of this room, a text window would display which type of makeup you received: harsh, natural, or bold. The final version of the game only hints at this with different sound effects. Finally, it's worth noting that even in FF7's retail release, the door through which you entered will show the Honeybee Inn's first floor lobby. Let's return to that lobby. Walking through the door on the right-hand side leads us to another scrapped room. The first thing to note is the television in the middle of the far wall. It cycles through 6 different images of field maps from the game: the Sector 5 church exterior, a beta version of Cosmo Canyon, the Gold Saucer's terminal floor, the Red Submarine Bay in Junon, the rocket launch pad in Rocket Town, and the foyer of Shinra Manor. If you enter this screen before choosing a room on the inn's second floor, the left couch will be occupied by Mookie, who's apparently come to unwind after a hard workout. If you re-enter the lounge after going into one of the rooms upstairs, his seat will be taken by one of his disciples, who laments being left behind after the others depart for Costa del Sol. The couch on the right side of the room is occupied by a man in a red jacket, who's eager to book Tifa's services. He asks if Cloud has heard about the newest Honey Girl. The player can inquire further or choose to end the conversation. If the former, the man in the red jacket will relate some unsavory rumors about Tifa. The player can then choose to agree with the NPC or point out he's mistaken. Last but not least is the portly NPC in overalls. You might recognize this model from earlier in the game, when Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse disguise themselves on the train headed for Mako Reactor 5. There, Wedge conspicuously notes that his disguise makes him feel like his little brother. Well, now you know who he's referring to. Wedge has made an illicit visit to the Honeybee Inn, and feels paranoid about being recognized. He can't bear the idea of Wedge finding out, especially when his big brother is off doing nobler things like saving the planet. It's time once again to return to the lobby. We've entered the inn looking for a clue to Tifa's whereabouts. The NPC who will provide one is the man with a rat tail standing next to the wall of Honey Girl photos. Ironically, asking the NPC if he knows a girl named Tifa won't elicit the information we're looking for. If you ignore the allegation and ask about Tifa again, the rat-tailed man will make some colorful comments about the inn's newest hostess, but withhold any hints about where we can find her. Alternatively, you can flip the accusation back on the NPC, who will start talking about his girlfriend and their wholesome relationship. Evidently, the pangs of chastity have driven him to find fulfillment at the Honeybee Inn. Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night. Okay, let's try this again. If you instead ask the rat-tailed NPC for a recommendation, he'll eventually land on Tifa, the new girl. Talk to him again and he'll tell you more. Unfortunately, Tifa's left the inn to make an appearance before Don Corneo, as is customary for first-timers. Phew, that was a lot. If this content hadn't been cut, no doubt there would have been thousands of players getting stuck at this unintuitive dialogue tree. As it happens, that's exactly what we've seen with people playing Shinra Archaeology Cut. If you try to go upstairs at this point, a bouncer will prevent you from doing so. Evidently, we need to get in line and wait our turn. There, we find a familiar face, the Shinra middle manager. If you talk to him, he'll rejoice that Shinra's able to foot the bill for his visit. He then turns to Cloud and admonishes him for chatting up strangers in such a seedy establishment, though that doesn't stop him from nearly handing us his business card. If you follow the receptionist's instructions and continue to wait in line, the Shinra middle manager will eventually turn and talk to you again, despite his previous comment. You can be agreeable and heed his advice, or contradict what he says. If you do the former, an elaborate scene will commence. The bouncer goes back upstairs and the camera slowly pans left. A honey girl is then called out to attend to the NPC at the front of the line. After entering the lobby, she blows him a kiss. It's too much for the weak-hearted man, who collapses from excitement. The man at the desk calls for help. Evidently, the staff are used to this kind of occurrence. Eventually, the honey girl returns to the dressing room on the left, and Cloud delivers a characteristic reaction. Now it's the Shinra middle manager's turn at the desk. He calls the receptionist over and takes a minute to make up his mind. When the matter of payment arises, he claims his bill is fully covered. Evidently, he's trying to charge it to Shinra as an entertainment expense. Before he can get away with this, however, something happens. If you're a fan of FF7's music, get ready to hear a brand new track. This song, internally titled Comical, doesn't play anywhere else in the game. It accompanies the appearance of director Palmer. He's thrilled to see the honey girl at the bottom of the stairs, but not at all happy to find a Shinra employee slacking off at the inn. The Shinra middle manager scrambles for an excuse, but doesn't do a great job. He tries to pass off his visit as on-site marketing research. What's worse, the honey girl who just greeted Palmer reveals that the middle manager is a repeat customer. Palmer flies into a rage and threatens his subordinate. The middle manager begs not to be transferred, a process that would entail formal acknowledgement of his debauchery. He then crawls on the ground and makes a dash for the exit, Palmer in hot pursuit. Now you know why our favorite Shinra employee winds up exiled to a dingy motel in Juneau. And that concludes everything we can do right now in the Honeybee Inn. Without a member's card, we won't be able to proceed upstairs. But at least we got what we came for. Equipped with information about Tifa's whereabouts, we can report back to Aerith. Exiting the inn, we find Aerith hounded by men. Instead of selling them flowers, like she does later on in the final version of the game, she's apparently been talking about her blossoming relationship with Cloud. Judging by what the spiky-haired roughneck says, Aerith has intimated she has a boyfriend. And if we talk to the man in the suit, it's clear Aerith's tattled about her and Cloud's time in Evergreen Park. Speaking to Johnny bears this out. He's learned that you spent the night at Aerith's house, only to come slinking back at dawn. And that's it for our first visit to the Honeybee Inn. The game now proceeds as usual. Cloud and Aerith make their way to Corneo's mansion, talk to the man out front, and resolve to sneak Cloud in wearing women's clothing. As in the retail release, we can now get our hands on the member's card key item. You might notice that the man who gives it to us bears a strong resemblance to the NPC who got dragged out of the inn after fainting. It's likely this is the same guy, forking over his card after realizing he can't take the plunge himself. It's time for a return visit to the inn. Aerith splits off from Cloud once again, exasperated that he's thinking of going back in. You can excuse yourself by saying it's to save Tifa, which doesn't convince anyone, or you can be a little more vague, inviting a witty response from Aerith. At any rate, once you're inside, you can talk to the receptionist to gain access to the second floor. At this point, a honey girl comes out to escort you. She'll have a split second where she recognizes you from when you talk to her in the dressing room, and nearly calls you Pooch once more. From here on, if you enter the dressing room on the left-hand side, she'll be missing from the leftmost chair, confirming it's the same NPC. At last, we can ascend to the second floor. You'll recognize this map, Onna 4, as the lobby from the final game. A strange scene immediately plays out upon entering. The screen turns red and an echo of Cloud detaches itself from his body. The honey girl then asks if this is our first time visiting the inn. If you choose the second response, Cloud will stop and think for a moment before realizing he doesn't remember. Well, that's odd. And here's something odder. You know that ghostly model we saw a moment ago? It's referred to internally as Zax, the devs' preferred romanization for Zack's Japanese name. Could Cloud's uncertainty be due to the fact his dead friend once visited the inn? Regardless which response you go with, the honey girl will now ask you to choose from 4 unique guest rooms. In an earlier implementation of this scene, the honey girl actually prompts you to pick one of 5 rooms. However, looking at the labels on the floor, we can see there are definitely only 4 options. We'll return to this little mystery in a minute. From here, the inn plays out similarly to how it does in the final version of the game, but with some notable differences. First, you may have noticed how we entered this screen through the door at the top. In the retail release, we enter from the bottom, and the door at the top instead leads to Onna 2, the honey girl's changing room. So where does the bottom door lead in the uncut version? The answer? A totally new room. Welcome to the Honeybee Inn's Employee Lounge, or Onna 6. Like the guest lounge downstairs, it features a TV cycling through several of FF7's maps. The 6 we saw downstairs, plus one of the fields from the Da Chao statue in Wutai. The employee lounge features 2 NPCs, an older-looking man snoozing in a chair, and a red-haired man in a suit leaning by a window. Talking to the older man lets us overhear some of his sleep-talking. As it happens, this scrapped NPC actually has scrapped dialogue of his own. In other words, lines that were cut before the employee lounge itself was cut. The man reveals the room didn't used to be an employee lounge. Apparently, it used to be called the Adult Hive, and comprised a 5th room that guests could enjoy themselves in. It's possible that this man's scrapped text is meta-commentary inserted by Toriyama, and refers to a 3rd room that players could have had the honey girl unlock for them. As you'll soon see, the game's files actually contain 3 adventures Cloud can experience when he chooses a room to enter. There's another piece of evidence that supports this theory. Take a look at this door here. When it's open, you can see out into Onna 4, the 2nd floor hub area. Notice anything odd? The color scheme and decor don't match what's actually out there. Compare this to the hub area as glimpsed through the doorway of Onna 5-2, the map Cloud enters when he selects a room to be unlocked. As you can see, the color scheme and decor match the final version of Onna 4. What this likely means is that an earlier version of the 2nd floor hub area existed that included a label for the southern room, the Adult Hive as the Dozing Man calls it. Unfortunately, this early lobby map is nowhere to be found in the game's files, and likely has been lost to history. As for the Adult Hive, we'll get back to that in a bit. Returning to the employee lounge, let's talk to the red-haired man by the window.
Oh, it's you again. This ain't no place for guests. We got lots of weirdos in here tonight. Has even me tired out. Sorry if I ain't exactly serving you with a smile. Something I can do for you? What are you up to? Oh, me? I'm just doing a little thinking. Say, do me a favor. Take a look out this window here. I can't see anything. Exactly. Nada. Can't see a single star thanks to that plate and all them pillars. But you know, at some point I got used to it. To this city without a sky. Say, you been in Midgar long? Long enough. Well, what's life like? Day to day, I mean. I do what it takes to get by. Yeah, that about sums it up. Getting by is all anyone can do in this city. That's why on mornings like this, I like to take a moment and remember all those invisible stars up there. Maybe they ain't so different from us down here. Despite it all, I just can't seem to leave this place. Strange, isn't it?
Before we leave this room, there's one more thing to note. Maybe you've already realized it, but this map actually appears during the final game, just not in gameplay. It's shown during the FMV where Midgar's Sector 7 plate collapses. Instead of the map montage from earlier, the television shows a news anchor whose report is violently cut short. Perhaps our window NPC's soliloquy about the unseen sky was meant to foreshadow this tragic event. Back on Onna 4, there are a few more differences to note between the inn's original implementation and the final product. Let's start with the two doors on the right, which both use the Onna 5 map. In the final game, peeking into these rooms lets you see some curious scenes through the keyhole. In the couple's hive up top, Reeve's parents comment on their son's corporate success and the odd accommodations he's chosen to set them up in. Below, in the Queen's hive, a CEO from the Gold Saucer is subjecting two employees to a questionable roleplay that bears eerie similarities to the game's plot. A few cut lines make the parallels even more obvious. However, if you disable the game from loading these maps, something different happens. After Cloud's exaggerated reaction, the game will display the following message on a black screen. This text is likely a holdover from before players could glimpse the room's interiors, though it's ironic considering how much of the inn would later be cut for its explicit nature. Before we move on, there's something else to note about Onna 5. As we just saw, this map can only be viewed with a keyhole overlay, and you can't maneuver Cloud around inside it. However, if we remove the overlay and load into it like a normal field, we find it's fully rendered and navigable. And while the door on the left-hand side isn't initially coded to open, it does have an open state. And if we glimpse outside, there it is again, the old version of the second floor lobby. So what does this all mean? Maybe you've already guessed. Onna 5, the room we're standing in now, was the lost fifth room, the so-called adult hive. Only later was it repurposed to be the two rooms on the right we peek at through the keyhole. Onna 6, the employee lounge, was then created to fill the southernmost slot. Finally, the time has come to enter a locked room. In the final version of the game, two possible scenarios can play out. They both occur on the same map, Onna 5-2. In the Love Hive, Cloud will encounter a semi-transparent version of himself and a cryptic scene will ensue. After fainting, he's awakened by Mookie and winds up with the lingerie key item if you talk to the Honey Girl. If you choose the Group Hive, on the other hand, a famous event plays out with Mookie and his band of young bubbies. At the end of this arduous episode, Cloud is rewarded with the Bikini Briefs key item. However, there's actually a third variation on Onna 5-2. Based on the order in which this map's text is stored, it's likely this third event is what was originally planned for the Love Hive before being changed to something less explicit. This is further supported by the fact that parts of it are recycled into the final Love Hive scene. Unfortunately, this scrapped event is missing motion data, so we have to guess at the choreography. Fortunately, the text makes most of it clear. As in the final scene, Cloud enters Onna 5-2 with the Honey Girl in tow, but he soon utters a very uncharacteristic line. Oddly, there's no speaker name indicated. The Honey Girl responds, remarking on how young he is for a soldier. The scene then jerks forward, and we suddenly find the Honey Girl mid-sentence. You're probably wondering what just happened here. Remember the Zack model we found on Onna 4? Well, it's stored on this map as well. In fact, it's used during the version of the Love Hive scene that plays out in the final game. Except there, it's got nothing to do with Zack. Instead, it's used as a stand-in for Cloud's true self, which in all other cases is represented by Cloud's child model. What's most likely is that the line Cloud spoke when he entered the room actually belongs to Zack. In other words, Cloud is experiencing parts of Zack's memory from his last night in Midgar before leaving for Nibelheim. If you're not convinced yet, don't worry. More evidence is on the way. Back in the present day, the Honey Girl leads Cloud over to a tub and commands him to get in. This sets off another convoluted dialogue tree that reveals all sorts of optional background bits about Cloud. For instance, he has a rule about getting in baths. He's afraid of water. He always keeps his underwear clean, and he doesn't dye his hair. Eventually, the Honey Girl runs out of patience and helps Cloud out of his clothes. Another series of dialogue choices commences. Regardless of how you answer, the Honey Girl will escort Cloud to the tub. Just like Mookie in the group hive scene, she'll ask Cloud if the water temperature's alright. After a while, something catches the Honey Girl's attention. Possibly Cloud's eyes. Possibly something else. The next moment, Cloud passes out and drowns. We're then shown a conversation between an unnamed man and woman. The man says he's about to set out on a dangerous mission. The woman, whom we can identify as the Honey Girl from the beginning of the previous scene, wonders if it's okay for him to be fooling around here. After all, there's another girl waiting for him. The man brushes aside her remark, saying he's gotten tired of the girl following him around. So, who is this man? Obviously not present-day Cloud, who's unconscious in the tub. And it can't be 16-year-old Cloud either, because he wasn't a soldier. Nor would he have been old enough to enter the inn. We're left with only one possibility. These lines belong to Zack, the soldier first class on whom Cloud would base his false identity. If you watched our video on Zack, you'll know he was added extremely late in FF7's development. Once Nojima had successfully worked him into the livestream sequence, he set about asking other developers to alter earlier scenes and include foreshadowing. One of the event planners he consulted was Motomu Toriyama, hence Zack's appearance on this map as well as Onna 4. Incidentally, it's very unlikely this exchange played out on a black screen. However, there's not enough context to determine what Zack and the Honey Girl would have been doing, perhaps still standing by the door, or maybe talking on the bed. Needless to say, this scene seriously conflicts with Zack's characterization in Crisis Core and Beyond, where he's portrayed as a much more devoted partner to Aerith. All the same, it's interesting to examine in the context of the OG, where Zack had so little character development. In fact, this short exchange more than doubles his total line count in the original Japanese version of the game. Okay, that was quite the digression. Let's get back on track. Cloud regains consciousness with a final unused line. Glimpsing Zack's memory seems to have reminded him he's in the middle of an important mission. At this point, just like in the final Love Hive sequence, you can collect your reward from the Honey Girl in the form of lingerie. However, something interesting happens if you don't. Back in the second floor hub area, the Honey Girl will make her way to the stairwell. If you speak to her before she reaches it and choose the first option, a risque conversation will ensue. From here on, repeatedly picking the second response will result in a series of excuses for why Cloud needs the Honey Girl's underwear.
I need your panties for a dangerous mission. There must be some other way to ask. I need your panties to give to my girlfriend. No, she'll see right through that. I'd love a memento. How about your undies? No, that's crap. Back to the drawing board. I like dressing as a lady. Panties, please. No, still not right. I am a pervert. I long for your scent. No way. Anything but that. Would you please give me your undies? Too eager. Gotta be cooler. I'm into you. Can I have your panties? Surely I can do better. Your panties, please. Too direct. Need to be subtler. I'm sick. I need your panties. How would that even cure me? Get serious.
Eventually, Cloud will run out of pretexts and ask for the article straight up.
Panties?
Regardless of how you broach the topic, the Honey Girl will commend your passion and fork the underwear over, along with a promise to keep your fetish a secret. Interestingly, the item she gives you is called sexy lingerie, implying they're a different pair from what she hands you on Onna 5-2. With that, we're nearly done with the Honeybee Inn. But what if we failed to talk to the honey girl and receive any underwear for our disguise? We can't just go back empty-handed. Fortunately, there's a failsafe. To find it, we'll have to go back to the guest lounge on the first floor. Remember that guy in the red jacket who was lying on the couch? If you talk to him with no underwear in your inventory, he'll note your dejected state. Lucky for us, he's obtained some panties of his own. Apparently, he snagged them from the clothesline behind 7th Heaven, and claims they belong to Tifa. Being the nice guy he is, he hands us the dubious panties key item. However, Cloud can't help but notice their childish-looking design. Going into our inventory confirms his suspicions. It appears these underwear don't belong to Tifa. We'll let you work out their true provenance on your own. With that, we've completed our mission in the Honeybee Inn. After a few different lines with Aerith at the entrance, the scenario merges back into the one we're all familiar with, leading us back through Wall Market and eventually into Don Corneo's mansion. Whenever we come across cut content in FF7, our instinct is to wonder why it was scrapped. Quite often, the reason seems to be pacing. In other instances, lines and scenes have been omitted due to simple programming errors. In the case of the Honeybee Inn, however, there's no question why these events were discarded. Even without Kitase's commentary, it's easy to see how Toriyama's initial vision would have clashed with ratings board criteria. Most likely, this material was shot down when Square's internal playtesting commenced. That wouldn't have been until the last couple months of development, November and December of 1996. Recall that these scrap scenes include references to Zack, which means that they not only still existed, but were updated when Nojima finally put a bow on FF7's middle act. We can deduce then that Toriyama only had a matter of weeks to revise all the events in and around the Honeybee Inn. This explains why the pacing in the final game seems so abrupt, why Cloud is immediately beset by a honey girl with no explanation of what's going on, why she accidentally starts to call him a nickname she can't possibly have invented yet, and why the arrangement of the building and its background textures feels so disjointed. Still, against all odds, the Honeybee Inn stands as one of FF7's most iconic locations. Even in its butchered form, Toriyama's unique sensibilities came through. And while the sequence would be substantially altered for FF7 Remake, its reimagining provided an opportunity for Toriyama to resurrect one of his scrapped gags, namely Palmer and the Shinra middle manager appearing at the inn.
Just don't tell the missus, okay?
Before we close out, we'd like to mention a few final things. First, Shinra Arch's implementation of the scrapped Honeybee Inn sequence is the culmination of years and years of effort and ingenuity from the FF7 community. Shademp's article on TLS, which is linked down below in the video description, will give you a much better idea of the obstacles involved and the amazing people who surmounted them. Second, for the sake of brevity, this video doesn't show every last bit of scrap dialogue from these scenes. If you'd like to familiarize yourself with the whole script, you can refer to the TLS article or check out the Shinra Arch retranslation spreadsheet. Alternatively, boot up Shinra Archaeology Cut through 7th Heaven and play through the content yourself. Finally, we want to note there's a measure of guesswork and minor technical fudging involved in implementing these scrapped scenes. There are several occasions where it's unclear which dialogue belongs to which NPC and to which iteration of the scene in question. In these rare instances, we've done our best to deduce the creator's intent and implement a version that flows smoothly. You can view detailed notes about this process in the retranslation spreadsheet. If you enjoyed this video and would like to help ensure we keep making more, consider joining the Last Elixir Patreon. Backers can enjoy 24-hour early access to videos, along with a bunch of other nifty perks. Whether you choose to join or not, we're grateful to all our viewers for your continued support.